I used to think Christmas Eve was the safest night of the year. A night wrapped in warm lights, the smell of cinnamon, the sound of family voices drifting through the rooms like soft music.
Oh, really?
But every December since that winter when I was 15, I remember a moment that shattered that illusion forever. I remember waking up to a man standing over me, his shadow bending across the glow of the dying fireplace, watching my chest rise and fall as if he were counting my breaths. And the scariest part is that he wasn't a stranger passing through town. He was living directly underneath us the entire time, moving quietly beneath our feet like a secret waiting to unfold. If stories are meant to leave a mark, then what happened that Christmas left one carved so deep into memory that I can still recount every breath, every creak, every cold rush of air against my neck. It's the kind of story you don't forget, not because of the danger alone, but because of how close it came to taking away the holiday I loved most. If you're new here and you enjoy real Christmas horror stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep bringing you true stories that stay with you long after the lights go out. My family lived on the upper floor of a two-family home my father, Richard, owned. The bottom unit was always rented out, and over the years we'd had all sorts of tenants. Young families, older couples, college students looking for quiet. My parents preferred tenants who kept to themselves, so when Caleb moved in that winter, mid-30s, soft-spoken, polite, my father thought we had finally found the perfect fit. But perfect fits don't knock on your door at 3 in the morning. And perfect fits don't lurk behind sheds in the middle of a family Christmas party. For the first few days, nothing felt strange. We were decorating the tree upstairs, preparing for my mom's famous Christmas Eve dinner, rearranging the dining room to fit the 20 family members who came over every year. Life felt normal, safe, familiar. But on Caleb's third night there, something changed. It started with the front door downstairs opening and closing over and over like someone pacing, going out, then immediately back in. Sometimes there was muffled talking, sometimes full-on shouting. My dad tried to ignore it at first, chalking it up to moving stress, but the noises grew louder, more unpredictable, more out of sync with the kind of tenant who had shaken his hand with such calmness that first day. One night, long after midnight, my father finally went downstairs. I watched from the top of the stairs as he knocked on the door, waiting. When Caleb answered, only half of him was visible through the crack in the door. His expression was stiff, almost startled, as if being confronted surprised him more than the noise he'd been making. My father asked politely if everything was okay, if he could try to keep things down. Caleb nodded without saying much. It wasn't a hostile moment, yet something settled in the air that night, a kind of invisible question neither of them voiced. My father walked back upstairs quieter than usual. When Christmas Eve finally came around, the house filled with warmth the way it always did. Laughter ricocheted off the walls. The dining room table stretched out to its longest possible size. Silverware clinked against plates. My older cousins teased each other. My younger cousins tore around the house with new toys. My mother tried to keep the kitchen from collapsing under all the dishes she'd prepared. For a while, all the strange feelings from the past week disappeared. My Uncle Mason, who had smoked since he was 16, stepped outside several times that night to get his fix. Not unusual, he always disappeared into the yard for a few minutes at a time, returning with frozen fingertips and exaggerated shivers. After the main course, he went out again, leaving his flip phone on the table by accident. When it buzzed repeatedly, my father told me to run it out to him. I grabbed the phone and headed down the stairs quickly. still hearing the muffled laughter from the dining room. When I stepped into the small front hallway, I noticed something odd. The back door, which normally stayed shut during winter to keep the cold out, was open just enough for snow to drift in. A small line of white trailed across the floorboards. I figured Uncle Mason must have gone to the backyard instead of the front. Without thinking much of it, I rushed through the hallway toward the yard, the phone still ringing in my hand. But when I stepped outside, the cold hit me instantly and I realized the yard was empty. The shed door, however, stood open. At first, I assumed Mason had gone inside the shed to get out of the wind, though the idea didn't make much sense. I moved closer anyway. The yard was quiet except for a faint rustle of movement inside the shed. I called his name. No answer. But someone stepped out. The figure walked quickly, confidently, as though he already knew where I was standing. At first, I squinted against the dark, thinking it was just the shadows distorting my vision. But as the figure came closer, the porch light cast across his face. It wasn't Mason. It was Caleb. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't say a word. He just moved toward me with a pace that didn't feel like someone casually leaving a shed. Instinct overrode logic. I bolted. The cold air tore at my lungs as I sprinted to the back door, slamming it behind me hard enough to rattle the frame. My heart hammered in my chest as I ran out the front instead, desperate to find my uncle. He stood in the driveway, smoking, oblivious to everything. I told him what happened. He laughed the way he always did when he thought I was being dramatic. But I stayed close to him until he finished his cigarette, too shaken to go inside alone. Back upstairs, I told my father the whole thing. The table fell into a stillness so sharp that even the kids paused. My father's face tightened, but he simply told us to enjoy Christmas. After the meal, he went outside to check. He returned saying that Caleb hadn't answered his door and that the shed was now closed. Hours passed. Guests left. My parents went to bed. My sister retreated to her room. I chose to stay on the living room couch, lying near the dying fire and the glowing tree. Something about the warm light always soothed me. I watched a movie until my eyelids grew heavy. And at some point I drifted into that half-sleep where you're vaguely aware of the world but not fully awake. That's when I heard it. A soft creak from the stairs. I didn't move. I assumed it was my mom getting water or my sister returning from the bathroom. But the Christmas tree, tall and full, blocked my view of the staircase. The sound of feet brushing against carpet drifted in and out. Then the faint click of a door at the end of the hallway. The fire had nearly died. The movie was over. The TV clock read 1 a.m. I considered getting up to head to my room, but the couch felt too warm, too comfortable, and honestly, I didn't want to walk down the dark hallway alone. Then I heard it. A tiny rustle near the tree. An ornament shifting, a branch trembling just slightly. Someone had bumped into it. I rolled to my side and peered at the tree. It stood perfectly still. No movement, no shaking. My tired brain told me it was nothing. I rolled back the other way and froze. A man was standing directly over me, bent slightly, watching me sleep. For a full second, my mind couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. The room was dim, but the faint glow of the fire illuminated his face just enough. It wasn't my father. It wasn't any family member. It was Caleb. My scream tore through the silence, raw and instinctive. Caleb jerked upright and reached to cover my mouth, but the moment he heard my father's bedroom door slam open, he bolted for the stairs. My father chased him out the front door, but by the time he reached the street, Caleb was already in his car, speeding away. Later, My parents used the documents they had from his rental application to help the police locate him. Court followed. We won. But those details feel small next to the memory of that night. I still remember the way the tree lights flickered against his face, the way he watched me, the way the world felt too quiet just moments before everything shattered. Christmas Eve didn't stop being beautiful after that, but it became something deeper, a reminder that even the warmest holidays can hold shadows, and sometimes the scariest dangers aren't outside your home. Sometimes they're living one floor below. People like to say hospitals feel more peaceful during Christmas. The halls are quieter. The air feels softer. Decorations glow in dim corners where harsh white lights usually dominate. But peace can be misleading. Silence can hide things you don't want to know are there. And sometimes the softest Christmas lights shine on the darkest shadows. I learned that lesson my first year as a psychiatric nurse during an overnight shift that began just a few minutes past midnight on Christmas Day. I'd barely adjusted to the job at that point. The patients, the routines, the unpredictable energy that floated through the unit at night. Nothing about it came naturally to me yet. But I was determined to make the best of it, to help people who had no one else to care for them. I just never expected one of those people to guide me into a night I still can't explain. Her name was Maribel. 70-something, frail, soft voice, eyes that seemed to drift between the world we all shared and a world only she could see. Diagnosed with severe schizophrenia years earlier, she was typically calm, though deeply attached to her own rituals. She spoke mostly in quiet mutters, sometimes addressing people who weren't in the room, sometimes chuckling at things no one else heard. She wasn't dangerous, at least not in the traditional sense, but from the moment I met her, I felt something I couldn't quite name. A strange awareness, like she understood more than she let on. The unit was decorated in gold and red that night, a string of warm lights running along the nursing station counter. Most of the main lights had been turned off, leaving only the dim nighttime bulbs glowing softly overhead. For a psychiatric ward, the atmosphere was surprisingly comforting. I tried to let the Christmas spirit lighten the weight of the night shift, and for the first couple of hours, it worked. Most of the patients slept. A few wandered in and out of their rooms, restless but harmless. The building was still. Around 3 a.m., I decided to check on Maribel. She hadn't slept all night, something the evening nurse had warned me about during shift change. Her door was cracked open just enough for the dim hallway light to spill across her blanket. When I stepped into her room, she was lying on her side, staring toward the wall with an expression that made me pause, like she was waiting for something to arrive. "Maribel," I whispered. "Do you need anything?" She didn't answer at first. She just turned her head slowly, her neck creaking ever so faintly, and when her eyes met mine, she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't even a polite one. It was a smile stretched by something sharp underneath, something knowing. It froze me for a moment. Then she laughed, not loud, not maniacal, just a soft, breathy giggle as if she were watching a scene play out behind me. It unsettled me more than I expected. Before I could ask again what she needed, she whispered something I didn't fully catch. Her lips moved slowly, forming words that slipped apart before they made sense. I leaned closer. What was that? Her eyes drifted toward the bathroom across from her bed. I followed her gaze. She whispered again, this time more clearly. Check the bathroom. A jolt of cold ran through me. Something in her tone didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a warning. I stepped toward the door of the small attached bathroom and clicked the light switch. Nothing happened. The room stayed dark. I hesitated. A broken light wasn't unusual in older facilities like ours. But the way Maribel watched me as I stood there, eyes full of expectation, made the hair on my arms stand up. I stepped inside anyway. The room was small with one sink and a toilet. The darkness was thick, swallowing most shapes, but as far as I could tell, nothing was out of the ordinary. I left the door open behind me to let in the faint glow from the hallway. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. There was no reason to be frightened, and yet something in my body insisted I shouldn't linger. When I stepped back out, Maribel had already turned toward the wall again. She didn't look at me. She didn't speak. It was as if she had delivered her message, and that was enough. I returned to the nursing station, trying to shake the odd feeling in my chest. I told myself it was just the exhaustion of the overnight shift, the tension of still learning the job. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted to the bathroom across the hall, the one used by staff and ambulatory patients. The door was shut. No light showed from underneath. A small draft curled around the frame, cooling the tiles beneath my feet when I walked by. After half an hour of trying to ignore it, curiosity won. I walked to the bathroom door, turned the knob, and pushed it open. The switch flicked beneath my thumb. Nothing. No light. That alone shouldn't have bothered me, but in a psychiatric unit, so dark rooms feel wrong, unsafe, like someone forgot to close a wound. I stepped inside carefully. My shoes clicked softly against the tile. The sounds of the ward faded immediately, from faint whispers and distant hums to a silence that felt too whole, too complete. I waited, listening. Then I heard it. Breathing. Slow, steady, and unmistakably human. It was coming from the far stall. I froze in place, my back stiffening as my mind raced through every possibility. A patient wandering in, another nurse, someone in crisis. But we always kept count, always. No one should have been in here. I took one step back and hurried out, my heart banging against my ribs as I ran to retrieve the door stopper behind the nursing station. When I returned, I wedged it under the bathroom door so it wouldn't close fully. The hall's dim light seeped into the room, casting pale illumination across the first stall. I crouched down and looked underneath both stalls from a distance. No feet. But one stall door was shut tight. I swallowed, feeling that same cold warning run through my chest. When I stood up, I leaned just enough to peer through the thin gap between the stall door and its frame. At first, I saw only darkness. Then something shifted slightly inside. I squinted, trying to make sense of the shape. And a face appeared, right there, inches from my eye, staring back at me through the crack. I stumbled backward so fast my hand slipped on the tile. My shoulder slammed into the sink. The figure on the other side didn't move, didn't react, didn't breathe harder or slower, it just watched me. I bolted out of the bathroom, kicked the door shut, and twisted the lock with trembling fingers. My hands shook so violently I could barely get the latch to catch. When it finally clicked, I backed away until my spine pressed against the wall. Nurse Howard had just returned from checking the far end of the ward and rushed toward me the moment he saw my face. "There's someone in the bathroom," I gasped. "Someone's in the stall." We unlocked the door together, both bracing as we swung it open. The light flicked on instantly. The stall stood wide open, empty, clean, not a sound, not a trace. There was no way, absolutely no way, someone had left that bathroom without passing me in the hallway or without us hearing the door. It was physically impossible. But neither of us had an explanation. We searched the unit again, every patient accounted for, every door locked, every security camera showing nothing unusual. The night stretched on, quiet and heavy. When my shift finally ended, I gathered my jacket, desperate to step into the winter air and shake off the unsettled feeling twisting in my chest. As I passed Maribel's room, I saw her lying exactly as before, eyes fixed on the ceiling. I hesitated at her doorway, unsure if I wanted acknowledgement or silence. As I turned to leave, her voice floated out softly. "Merry Christmas." I froze. Her face was calm, smiling, but not the warm kind of smile, not the grateful kind. It was the same unsettling smile she'd given me hours earlier. The one that made me think she knew something I didn't. Something she'd seen before I ever stepped into that dark bathroom. I walked away without answering, the sound of her voice echoing in my head all the way to the parking lot. Snow was falling lightly, catching the glow of the street lamps in soft halos. The world felt peaceful again. But I didn't feel comfort, not entirely. I felt watched. Even now, years later, I still think about that face behind the stall door, about the way it appeared without sound, without warning, about the way it vanished as if it had never existed at all. But most of all, I think about Maribel, how she knew to warn me, how she sensed something none of us could see. How she whispered those words as though she'd been waiting for the right moment to say them. Check the bathroom. Some Christmas warnings come as gifts. Not the kind wrapped in bows, but the kind that remind you the world is stranger, darker, and more mysterious than you want to believe. And sometimes the people we care for, the ones society forgets, can see the shadows long before they fall over us. Some memories stay with you because they're beautiful. First holidays in a new home. The smell of pine drifting through the living room. The way snow turns an ordinary night into something magical. But some memories stay with you because they nearly ended everything you thought was safe. I used to believe cutting down our own Christmas tree would be one of those wholesome, picture-perfect traditions couples cherish for a lifetime. Instead, it became the night I learned that the wilderness can hide more than silence, and that the wrong person in the wrong place can turn a beautiful moment into a fight for what matters most. My girlfriend Tessa and I had moved into our first apartment together earlier that year. It was small, old radiators, creaky floorboards, mismatched cabinets, but it felt like ours. We wanted our first Christmas to be something we'd always remember. She wanted lights around the balcony. I wanted a real spruce tree, one we cut down ourselves. Living in New Hampshire meant winter swallowed the landscape early, but it also meant a drive into the hills would lead us straight into miles of untouched forest. I had this idea that trudging through the snow together, finding the perfect tree, chopping it down, maybe even taking a few pictures along the way would become a tradition. The kind of sentimental story we'd tell our kids one day. Tessa wasn't quite as enthusiastic. She liked warmth, stability, predictability, things that didn't involve hiking up snowy hills with cold wind biting at her face. But she agreed, partly because she knew it mattered to me, and partly because she thought it could be romantic in its own rugged way. We left just before sunset. Snow drifted across the road in soft spirals. The sky glowed pale gray, the kind of color that made everything feel hushed, suspended. I drove my pickup into the hills, scanning for a clearing large enough to pull into. Eventually, I spotted what looked like a slight break in the tree line. I turned off the road, hearing gravel crunch beneath the tires before the snow covered it again. It wasn't an official parking spot, but it would do. When we stepped out, the cold was sharp enough to sting. Tessa wrapped her scarf tighter, exhaling clouds of white. I handed her the flashlight I'd packed and grabbed the small axe from the back of the truck. "You sure about this?" she asked, half teasing, half serious. "Absolutely," I said. "It'll be fun. You'll see." We ventured uphill, weaving between towering spruce trees that rose like columns in a frozen cathedral. The snow crunched softly under our boots. Every few minutes, Tessa would comment on the temperature or the steepness of the hill. I pretended not to hear her complaints, though her tone had that familiar mix of reluctance and affection. Most of the trees were far too big for our living room, so we passed dozens of them. But after 15 minutes of climbing, we found it. A perfect little spruce, full and green, just under 7 feet tall. "This one," I said, stepping forward. "This is it." Tessa nodded, though I could see the frost on her eyelashes and the redness in her cheeks telling me she was ready to head back to the car immediately. I checked the trunk, gave it a firm pat, and swung the axe. The sound echoed through the trees, each strike repeating itself in the stillness. The trunk wasn't thick, and after a handful of hits, the tree leaned, teetered, and fell into the snow with a soft whoomp. I expected Tessa to help me carry it, but when she touched the branches, she pulled her hand back instantly. "I forgot my gloves," she said, annoyed with herself. "I swear I brought them." I had a spare pair in the truck. I tossed her the keys. "Go grab them, I'll wait here." She started back down the hill, muttering about how freezing her hands felt. I watched her go until she disappeared around a bend. Then it was just me, the tree, and the forest. I sat down on the trunk of the fallen spruce, taking a moment to breathe. I'd always loved the strange quiet that comes with deep woods in winter. The kind of quiet that feels alive, like the landscape is holding its breath. The wind was gentle, carrying flecks of snow into the air. The sky above was darkening into a smoky blue. After a minute or two, I turned on the flashlight and placed it upright on a small stump, letting the beam point skyward. It would help Tessa find me again. But then after a few minutes, I heard something. Footsteps. Slow at first, deliberate, but definitely footsteps. "Tess," I called. The steps stopped instantly. I frowned. She always responded when I called out, mostly because she enjoyed giving me a hard time about my dramatic shouting into the woods. I stood up, scanning the darkness between the trees. The snow muffles distant sounds, but close footsteps. You always hear those. No response, no movement. I tried again, louder this time. "Tessa, you good?" Nothing. A prickle slid up the back of my neck. The forest no longer felt peaceful. The air grew tighter, heavier somehow. I kneeling down, scanning the snow beneath the trees for prints. But the light from the flashlight didn't stretch that far, and shadows melted together into one shifting mass. Then, out of nowhere, the footsteps returned, faster this time, coming toward the beam of light. I assumed Tessa was messing with me. She loved turning my own jokes against me. So I stepped toward a tree and hid behind it, crouching slightly, waiting to jump out and startle her first for once. The footsteps grew louder, crunching steadily. Finally, someone burst into the clearing, but it wasn't Tessa. A man I'd never seen before sprinted straight toward the flashlight, his hood pulled low, his body hunched like he'd been living in the cold for days. His boots slammed the snow hard. He stopped abruptly when he reached the flashlight and stared at it for a moment, as if assessing whether it belonged to him. For a second, I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. He reached down, grabbed the flashlight, and clicked it off in one quick motion. Darkness swallowed everything. My mind stuttered, refusing to understand what was happening. Then instinct jolted me alive, and I ran. The sound of my boots smashing through the snow was deafening in the silence. Branches whipped against my coat as I tore downhill, gasping for air, slipping on icy patches but refusing to slow down. Halfway down, I heard something worse than footsteps. I heard Tessa scream. Her voice ripped through the woods, raw and panicked, calling my name. My legs burned as I pushed harder, stumbling down the slope until the clearing near the truck came into view. The headlights flashed suddenly, then the horn blared in frantic bursts. I sprinted the last few yards, nearly collapsing as I yanked open the driver's side door and hurled myself inside. Tessa was in the passenger seat, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold herself upright. "Drive!" she screamed. "Colin, drive!" I didn't need to hear it twice. My hands fumbled with the keys, twisting them so fast I nearly broke them. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the truck into reverse, backing out into the road without looking. Snow sprayed behind us as the tires caught. I threw it into drive and hit the gas. We didn't speak for the first 30 seconds. The only sound was the pounding of my heart and the wind slicing past the windows. When we finally looked back, we saw him, the stranger, standing exactly where the truck had been parked, motionless, hands at his sides, watching us disappear. Tessa sucked in a shaky breath, tears streaking her cheeks. I reached for her hand and squeezed it. My own hands shook so badly I could barely grip the wheel. When we reached town, we drove to the nearest Home Depot, pulled into the parking lot, and sat in the truck for a solid minute before either of us moved. Neither of us said it, but we both felt the same thing. We weren't going back to that forest, ever. We walked inside, still shaken, and bought the first 6-foot tree we saw. It didn't matter how it looked, it was safe. Back at home, as we secured the tree in its stand, Tessa finally whispered, "We're never doing that again, not ever." I nodded. No argument here. I learned something that night. Sometimes the world gives you small warnings wrapped in moments that feel wrong, too quiet, too still. Sometimes nature isn't the danger, it's the people hidden inside it. And sometimes choosing the safer path isn't giving up adventure, it's choosing to come home. Our first Christmas tree didn't come from a snowy hilltop in the wilderness. It came from a bright store full of people, noise, and safety. And to this day, that tree remains the best decision we ever made. When the last story ends and the screen begins to dim, I'm always struck by the same thought. None of these moments were supposed to happen. Christmas is the one night of the year when we expect warmth, safety, routine. We hang lights to keep the dark away, surround ourselves with people we love, and trust that the world outside will wait until tomorrow to show us its ugly side. But danger doesn't check calendars. Darkness doesn't take holidays off. And the truth is, sometimes the most unforgettable Christmas memories aren't shaped by the gifts we opened or the meals we shared, but by the moments that forced us to understand how fragile safety really is. A tenant who stood over a sleeping boy, a patient who saw what no one else could, a stranger waiting in a silent forest. Different places, different people, different nights. But all three stories share one thing. Each of them reminds us how thin the line is between comfort and chaos, trust and instinct, routine and survival. And yet, despite everything, there's something else woven between these moments. Something quieter, something stronger. It's the way a father runs toward danger without thinking twice. The way a nurse keeps going even when her hands shake. The way two people hold each other a little tighter after escape in the woods. The way Christmas lights still glow even after the darkest hours. Fear might enter our lives without invitation. But resilience, instinct, courage, those are things we carry with us. They don't fade when the season arrives. They don't break under pressure. They rise even when our voices tremble. So as this video draws to a close, I want you to take one thing with you. The world can change in an instant. Shadows can appear anywhere, but so can strength. Sometimes your safety depends on listening to the whisper you can't explain. Sometimes it depends on trusting the people who love you. And sometimes it depends on walking away from the darkness even when you don't have all the answers. These stories aren't meant to haunt you. They're meant to remind you that light matters most when the night is cold and uncertain. That your instincts exist for a reason. And that even in the moments that shake us, there's always a way forward. As you turn off this video and return to your own quiet spaces, I hope you carry a little more awareness, a little more appreciation for the people who protect you, and a little more belief in your ability to protect yourself. Because the most unforgettable Christmas stories are not the ones we choose. They're the ones that choose us, change us, and stay with us long after the snow is melted. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay aware. And remember, even in the darkest moments, there's always a light waiting to be found.